Hi, Premier. It's good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time
my
for
pleasure.
the conversation. I wanted to start off on the convention here. In particular, huge result for Pierre Poilievre. Every person I've interviewed involved in their campaign has said, the focus is very much on anticipating an election and what now. You've won an election. This party did not win the last election. What's your best advice to him about the what now question?
I can tell you is the advice that I gave him during the campaign when it was at a hard point. I said, you found a way to take the Conservative Party to a point where we could get within reach of government and haven't been able to do that for a long time. I know you're going to find a way on this one. And part of what happened in the last election is the Liberals had to massively pivot, steal a lot of Pierre's platform on carbon tax, on becoming an energy superpower, and a few other things. And I think that's why they were able to squeak in. But this strong mandate allows him to go back to Parliament and make sure that he pushes the government on the things they committed to in the next election, and also that offer that alternative if they don't.
Do you think it's harder to paint the picture of the alternative now that, as you point out, a lot of the policies that this version of the Liberal government is putting forward are much more reflective of, it would conventionally you'd characterize as conservative policies versus like what we had seen under the former Prime Minister? Is it more difficult than it might have been even a year ago to paint that contrast, do you think?
They're two different leaders for sure, but I think they own the Trudeau Liberal legacy because so many of those MPs were at the cabinet table or in the caucus voting for them. And it's by no means clear to me that the Prime Minister has won that war within his own party to be able to push this agenda forward. It's very clear that because he doesn't have a majority, the NDP and the Greens are not supportive of the agenda that has been put forward, and so there's a lot of pressure on him. That's why I think having a very strong voice from Pierre is going to make a real difference.
The Prime Minister and his support, his MPs often invoke the MOU with you as evidence that he is different. He is serious about advancing that agenda. What do you make of that, and do you take that at face value?
I guess we have a big test coming. There's a couple of things I'd say. It's already made a difference, the MOU. By saying that Alberta will have a carve-out on the clean electricity regs, we now have 20 data centers that are moving towards final investment decision because they can now use natural gas without fear that someone's going to go to jail in 2035 if they don't meet 95% abatement reduction targets, because we're now stretching it out to 2050. That's been a huge win. Second was the emissions cap being eliminated. We now have Enbridge, South Bow, Trans Mountain, and others with us, with the West Coast Pipeline, talking about expanding production, whereas the conversation before was shutting in 2 million barrels. So it's already had an impact. That being said, the exercise before us right now is, can we trade with each other? Can the country work? Can we develop regulatory processes that will allow us to get these big major nation building projects built? And I guess the jury's still out on that. We have to see. I'm encouraged by the Major Projects Office. I know that the Conservatives supported C5 as well, but we have to see some of these projects move from consideration to approval to shovels in the ground. And that's what we'll see over the next year.
The one project I want to ask you about is, of course, the possibility, and we've spoken about this on multiple occasions, no surprise, the possibility of a pipeline to the West Coast. And in particular, I listened with great interest as the Prime Minister very specifically said this week in the House of Commons that the MOU will get a pipeline built to the West Coast. Like, that was the exact verbiage that he used that I had not heard him be as explicit about before. He's intimated such would be the case, but not as explicitly as that. Has he been explicit to you in providing assurances that that will happen?
Well, I think he's told us, of course, to go through the process, but that was what the MOU was about. It was about us jointly committing to what we would need to do to get a pipeline built. Look, when foreign dignitaries came to Canada under Justin Trudeau, he said there was no business case for energy to be exported. This is a Prime Minister who went to Asia and heard the same things we heard. In Asia, they want two main things. They want energy security and the food security. And we've got them both, and we've got such an advantage because we've got several ports off the West Coast that we can export to them. We've already got an oil pipeline that has demonstrated its value, a gas pipeline, propane pipeline, and if we can get another 1 million barrel a day pipeline to the coast, it will open those new markets. And I think that that's exactly what it is we're trying to do as we face some uncertainty with our U.S. relationship.
Has he been explicit with you?
You mean, has he said, no matter what you put in, it's going to be approved. No, he's not said that. He said, do your work and put it in the major projects office, go through the process. And we're taking that seriously. We have all of the major pipeline project proponents at the table. And there's already one port that we ruled out, and that was the port that was going to be with Northern Gateway, Kitimat. And part of that is, I mean, I always questioned why they chose that port, because it's pretty obvious to me. There's a lot of ports with many channels you have to navigate, and Kitimat is one of those. You can navigate the smaller LNG ships a little bit more easily, but much harder to navigate some of the large tanker ships, as I understand it. So why take that risk? So let's work on trying to find a port that is on the open water so that you have a direct line of sight to the open sea, and you can mitigate a lot of the environmental concerns. And that's what we're looking for, and there's several options along that coast.
I want to switch gears and ask you about separation, the prospect of it. I interviewed the leader of the Alberta Prosperity Project, who'll be on the program a little bit later on. And he conveyed, and he has conveyed to other media outlets as well, that there are, he claims, members of your caucus who have signed the petition that endorses the idea of separating from Canada. Are you aware of any MLAs in your caucus who have?
I'm not. But which leader did you talk to?
Sorry, Jeffrey Rath. I'll be clear. That's the Alberta Prosperity, the one who went to meet with the officials in the State Department as he.
There's lots of people who are doing petition campaigns. I don't know. I mean, I don't police the responses of my MLAs. They can sign whatever petition that they want. But I would say that my approach and the approach of our caucus as a united caucus has been to support a sovereign Alberta within United Canada. That means federal government respects our areas of jurisdiction just as we respect their areas of jurisdiction. I think we're moving in the right direction on that, but not completely. The reason I asked is because one of the signatories, Mitch Sylvester, is a gun shop owner. And the MOU may be important to a lot of Albertans, but what's important to him is that he's been criminalized by his federal government because he has stock that is going to be rendered illegal in October. He's got customers who are going to become criminals if they don't turn their guns in October. And it's an unpopular law everywhere across the country with the exception of Quebec. So I told the Prime Minister, we want to start bringing the temperature down, respect that Quebec is different than the rest of the country. If you want to take a different approach there, go ahead. But you've got to see that some of these things have created the point that we've come to this.
If I understand you, and I've heard you talk on this a lot correctly, it's that you are sympathetic and empathetic to the sentiment that underpins a lot of what is providing momentum for this movement. And I understand that, having worked here too. We've talked about it many times. But there is a delineation between, wanting to fight for the things that you're talking about and wanting to break up the country. Why, with great respect, is it okay for members of your caucus to sign any petition they like, including one that asks for that to happen?
As again, I don't know anyone who has signed it, so I don't know how to answer that.
But you did say they can sign whatever petition they want, and I have to challenge you on that. Like, if your caucus can't stand together in saying, we get all this, but we want to remain in Canada, then how can you expect Albertans to decide that?
Well, we need to see some action on the part of the federal government, is what I would say. And I'm sympathetic to the million Albertans who have lost hope that this isn't a real change of heart on the federal government's part, that it was a last-minute deathbed conversion to try to avoid losing an election. And that's part of the reason why having a strong opposition leader like Pierre, making sure that every step of that MOU is implemented, that the bad laws around immigration, the bad laws that have created the affordability crisis, the bad laws around public safety are corrected. And if we have some common cause in both of our main federal parties, that's positive for everybody. That moves things along in a way that I think undoes a lot of the damage of the last 10 years. But it's moving slowly, and I would like to see it move a lot faster, and so would a lot of Albertans. But I think that that's what we have to understand, is there's a lot of people who were hurt by the last 10 years.
I wouldn't want to take away from that. I do understand that. But understanding that, empathizing with it, endorsing it, advocating for it is not the same thing as saying you want to break up the country. Like, why are you unwilling to say your caucus should not sign that petition?
As soon as you tell me which caucus members have signed, then we can have a conversation. I just don't know that any have signed. So we're talking about a hypothetical situation I don't even know exists. When we have a conversation in caucus, we talk about how we can ensure that the federal government lives up to its commitments so that we can have our constitutional jurisdiction respected. And that's what we'll keep doing.
There are two pieces of legislation that your government passed last year that essentially made it easier for a petition to make its way to the referendum stage. Do you regret doing that, given what what's unfolded now?
Well, no, we've got a referendum happening on the development of the Grassy Mine coal mine. We've got also another referendum that has been approved, I believe, on independent funding for private schools. It's a mechanism for citizens to move on issues that the government does not have on their agenda. I mean, we have an agenda that we want to implement. I have an approach which is to continue to assert our rights to manage our own affairs under constitutional jurisdiction. Other Albertans have a different idea, and we'll see if they can convince their fellow Albertans that they're right. I'm watching it, and we'll see in May whether or not they're able to get the number of signatures.
But the examples that you provided would not have nearly, and I understand like the idea of having people feel like they are able as a public to be able to have a greater voice in what unfolds in their own province. All that you referenced there are in no way analogous to the idea of a referendum happening on splitting up this country, one that you have previously told me you would have to recognize because that's a commitment that you made. Like, that is a very different and very serious thing. Like, do you not regret making that easier to happen given what is unfolding right now?
No, I mean, in California, they have a bar of 5% for general policy changes and 8% for constitutional changes. It just made sense to have the same higher bar, 10% for all changes. 10% of your fellow citizens is a very high bar. I don't know that any other province has citizen-initiated referenda like we do. And I'm very interested to see if any of the petitions that are active right now are going to be successful. The first one was, and so we have to give consideration to that. And that's something that should be considered. Is the first petition campaign was a yes-no question. Do you want to remain in Canada, yes or no? And it was the same question just asked in a different way. Do you want to leave Canada, yes or no? So I think that we're already grappling with what to do with that first petition, since the petitioner got cold feet and doesn't want it to go to a referendum now. So that's going to go to a committee. But this is why we need to see the process through. And so that's what we're going to do. And I won't prejudge the outcome until we see it.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Premier, pleasure as always. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
Vassy.